But weren't you once up on in a plane somewhere and a snake was on board and you had to throw it out the top?
I was flying at 10,000 feet with a friend, a childhood friend. He's a firefighter by profession. And I was flying along, and it was across the Florida panhandle. So, Florida's got that long peninsula and then the skinny part along in the north part of Gulf of Mexico. And there's the main east-west highway in the United States is I-10, Interstate 10. So I'm basically flying along I-10 up at 10,000 feet, 2 miles up. And I felt I was wearing a headset, and the cord is down by my leg. And I felt the cord from my headset brush against, I was wearing short pants, felt it brush against my leg. So I sort of moved the cord out of the way. Then I felt it brush against my leg again, moved the cord out of the way. I felt it like pushing on my leg. And I looked down, and it was a snake. At 2 miles up I'm like, wah! And not what you expect. And so
that's what you call a variable.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate variable.
My buddy and I had grown up with snakes. We have cottages near each other on an island, and he had the little clipboard that had all the information of the airplane. So he pinned the snake's head against the ground, like the approved technique. So the snake was writhing, but its head was stopped. Then he reached down and, grabbed the snake just behind its head. And now he's got this snake whipping around his arm, and we're up at, what do you do next? Well, if you have a fire or smoke in one of these little airplanes, there's this little window you can pop open next to you. Makes a real racket because then, the wind's going by at nearly 200 miles an hour, but at least it's immediate exit to the world. And we figured the only better place for this snake to be would be out somewhere and not in the cockpit. So my buddy Russ reaches over and sticks his hand through, and then he's like scraping the snake off his arm, and then boop, out it goes out the window, close the door again. And then the two of us are like, did that just happen? How it only took 30 seconds. And then I pictured this poor little snake. And, I don't know, it was a snake, biggest snake I'd ever seen while flying an airplane, but it wasn't a boa constrictor. Anyway, I could picture the snake falling 2 miles, and then some poor guy driving his convertible on I-10, having a semi-frozen snake plummet into the car next to him. But anyway, I hope that snake forgives me, but I think it probably, when I was loading the airplane and I had my duffel bag and stuff, I think it probably slithered into my duffel bag. And then when I loaded in the plane, I didn't notice. And then it was just, being a snake and coming out to see what was going on. But that got my attention.
But again, you're able to, that is the ultimate variable, but you're able to deal with the unpredictable. I think that's the one thing. See, sport is where Ben and I come from. That's our background. That's what, that's where we live and breathe. And one of the things we love about sport is the unpredictability of it. The fact that you don't know what might happen next and you don't know the outcome. It cannot be foreseen. When you're prepping, when you're planning for any of the things that you've done previously in your life, obviously there is going to be a degree of unpredictability attached to that. How do you best prepare for that? It may not be a snake on a plane, but it may be how you journey to space and what happens when you get there. How do you plan for those eventualities?
Well, I think it is like sport in that you have a clear objective of what success is going to look like, whether it's winning in a sailboat race or any sport at all. And I agree with you. Sport, the whole beauty of it is the unpredictability, and you have to actually play the match to find out who is the best. But if you truly want to win, then you can't just enter into the competition and hope you're going to do okay. You visualize what success looks like, and then you start practicing. You start changing your own body. You need to build up the musculature and strength and endurance. And then you simulate whatever it is, the competition you're going to be in. You do partials of it, or you do drills, or you practice with other people, or if you're going to run a marathon, you run all the subsets of a marathon and work your way up. And space flight and being a fighter pilot and a test pilot, it's the same thing. You have a clear goal in mind, but you don't have all the skills yet. And you need to then break it into individual skills and pieces that you have to develop. And then you start integrating them together. And you try and, if you truly want to get ready, then you need to have as realistic a simulation as you possibly can, so that when the actual game or the actual event is happening, it feels familiar. And you have all sorts of depth of reaction to things going wrong, because things are going to go wrong. And in your simulation, you should have practiced an endless litany of failures and mistakes and things that might no longer be working, so that you learn and develop all of the skill set to work around them. And so I was an astronaut for 21 years. I was in space for 6 months. So that means for 20 and a half years, I was getting ready for those 6 months in space. And even though myriad things went wrong, none of them were insurmountable. None of them killed us. We managed to prevail over all of them and return essentially 100% successful from all 3 space missions. But it wasn't because of luck. It was because of a clear sense of purpose, and then an absolutely relentless necessity to get better and better at all of the things, all of the skills that we needed.
In that 21 years and the 6 months as well that's incorporated in that, what was the best bit? I know that seems like a really basic question, but what was the bit that sort of you look back on and you think, oh, that was just great. I loved every minute of that moment.
All
what
21
made it the
years.
most worthwhile?
I mean, if I was counting on a bit, on one best bit, to have justified 21 years of work, I would have driven myself mad, you know. And so I'm the type of person who deliberately loves every single thing that I'm doing, because there are people I meet who seem to choose to hate their own lives. Like I hate this. I don't want to do this. I hate doing these things. What an awful thing to do to yourself. I mean, there is pain and pleasure in everything. There is regret and joy in everything. And I mean, if I got to go out and shovel the snow in the driveway, I could make that the worst day of my life, or I could make it a whole bunch of fun. Totally up to me. It's psychological. I mean, and so in my 21 years as an astronaut, there was a tremendous amount of drudgery, of repetition. I mean, on my 3rd flight, I was the pilot of a Russian rocket ship and Russian spaceship. So I had to learn to speak Russian. And then I had to learn orbital mechanics and control theory and everything. And then learn to fly and work with Russian mission control and operate the spaceship in Russian. And studying Russian for 20 years, a lot of people would not think that's fun, you know, but it's totally individual as to how you determine whether you're getting pleasure or boredom out of things. And, you know, there are no boring things. There are just boring people. And I try not to be a boring person. And so I could choose 100 different things that were pinnacles of joy. You know, on my first space launch on Space Shuttle Atlantis, after 8.5 minutes, when those big engines shut off and we were suddenly magically transformed and weightless. And now I was an astronaut and no one could ever take this away. This was a threshold that is so rare and so hard to accomplish. And I was there and part of the crew that made this happen. Or opening the hatch and pulling myself out on my very first spacewalk. And during that spacewalk, going through the aurora of the world and having the greens and reds of the southern lights pouring around me and pouring around the spaceship. Or being on the International Space Station and having a major catastrophic emergency and having to pull every skill my crew had and working with the ground and do an emergency spacewalk to go out and save the world's spaceship and triumphantly accomplishing all those things. Those are all, you know, easily identifiable pinnacles. But if you're counting on rare moments in your life to justify everything else, you're going to be miserable. And instead, I would very much counsel anybody else, because it's what I've counseled myself my whole life, and that is find great moments of joy as often as you possibly can. Give yourself somehow the permission to succeed 10 times every day, and notice the little successes, and feel like a winner. And it doesn't have to matter to anybody else. They don't care what you're doing. So just allow yourself that privilege, and life becomes so much more calming and joy filled and triumphant, and gives you a secret smile for every single day. And so, yeah, I've had some high moments, but to me, every single day has high moments in it.
Here's the thing. You can't really have the success without a few failures either. And my goodness, do they teach you a thing or two? I was saying to my husband the other day, it drives me mad, actually. The children's education system in this country is all about getting everything right. It's like, if you can't get things wrong when you're 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, when can you get things wrong? What has failure taught you as well? I mean, I know when we're talking about what you do, we're talking about a life and death situation if things do go badly wrong. But there are little journeys and little lessons along the way with failure. What has that taught you more than anything? Probably not to do it too often.
Well, no, I mean, things always go wrong. You can absolutely count on things going wrong. That's just how things go. And some of the majority of the failures will be minor, but occasionally there's one that has enormous consequence. And when you see the possibility of enormous consequence and high probability, then that's the thing you've really got to focus on. And so part of failure is learning to anticipate the early signs of it so that you can then do the work in advance and not just have to fight a rearguard action and clean up afterwards. And I think about that consciously all the time. Like, I don't know if you've done this recently, Georgie, but what are the 10 greatest threats to your life right now, or the things that you want to do? And why wouldn't you, sit down and go, what are the, to just to my life, or to me feeling successful in life, or whatever is valuable to you? What are the 10 greatest threats? And be realistic about it. And what am I doing about those things in advance? Or am I just sort of whistling past the graveyard and rubbing my rabbit's foot and hoping, hope those things don't happen, because I really have no clue what I'm going to do when they do happen. I don't want to not be ready for my own life, and if I can look at, I don't know, something mundane and predictable. My parents are elderly. They're 89 and 87. And I love my parents, and I try and support them and spend time with them where I can. But they're getting close to the end of life. They will die sometime relatively soon. It's just a fact. So it's going to be emotionally difficult. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, but it's a great thing to simulate and just say, okay, what are we going to do when, whatever, one of our parents dies? What are we all going to do? Like, who's going to do what? And does everybody know what their role might be and where we should go? And does anybody know the details? Like, where is their will and what did they want done with their body and all the rest of that stuff? And trying to analyze it when you have time, when there's no pressure, when everybody's not upset, when someone's not, 1,000 miles away, actually having the conversation and maybe even simulating it, saying, okay, let's just pretend that whatever, my dad just passed away. Now, who's going to deal with what? Who's going to call who? Who's going to take it over? And then you sure don't want the bad thing to happen, but it actually is really helpful. Everybody's a lot calmer. Everybody's a lot readier. During one of my simulations for spaceflight, it was one where I died as commander of the spaceship. And it was a big simulation with the management teams and the international organizations. And I thought this would be a great simulation for my wife to attend. And normally they don't have spouses come in to astronaut simulations, but she came to it. Her name's Helena. And she had plans for what to do while I was in space for half a year. But when she actually saw what the sequence of events was going to be like, and the media showing up at the front door of the house, and social media and phone calls, and how was she going to communicate with our kids, and she realized, okay, I need to actually have a better plan, and I need to be in a different place than I thought. In case this relatively high probability event actually happens, I need to be ready for it. And to me, I think that's one of the best ways to deal with failure, is to recognize the inevitability of it, and then to think and learn about the details of it, and then to try and simulate and get ready for it, so that when it does happen, you have a much higher probability of reacting well and not having it to be devastating to you. And hopefully, with that philosophy along the way, you built up enough skill set so that one day on the space station, when it starts spewing liquid ammonia out to space and it's not in any of your checklists, you have the collective experience to be able to understand how best to deal with that thing. And that philosophy, to me, applies to everything.
That makes a lot of sense. This is the Performance People podcast. So what I would love from you, and I'm sure there are many different versions of this, but perhaps we could condense it to one. What is the best thing, the best piece of advice that you could give people that are looking for better 24/7 performance in their everyday lives? I don't know how you relate an astronaut to space and space to the everyday life, but perhaps it's easier than I assume. And what would be the one thing that people could do better in their lives every day to give themselves that best performance?
I think the first step is to identify or define what victory looks like for you. What is it that I'm actually trying to accomplish? If better performance is relative to what and for what aim, and so give yourself a clear understanding of what it is that your end goal is. And you don't just have one of those, you've got several. But make sure those are clear, because those are the bits of sticky stick-up notes in the distance that are actually guiding what it is that you're going to do today. And then once you've got those guideposts of what it is you're trying to accomplish, then make the little decisions on a regular basis that help herd your life along in those directions. But without those end goals, then how do you keep motivated in anything? I want to be in better shape. For what? But without a goal, then the process will eventually derail itself. But when you've got a goal in mind, hey, I'm going to run a marathon, or I'm going to live to be 100 years old, or I'm going to fly a spaceship, then okay, this is why I'm keeping my body in shape. And this is the measure of how in shape I need my body to be. And so you've got those long-term goals, but then take responsibility for your small decisions in life. And I think it's really vital, Georgie, in that it's easy, to join a health club. Joining a health club does not make you fitter. In fact, it's sort of pretending to get fitter, right? It's like buying flashy new trainers or running shoes. It's a step in the right direction, but what you actually need to do is make the small decisions that move you towards the things that are important to you. And we tend to absolve ourselves of the import of our small decisions. But actually, they're the only decisions you ever have. The big stuff, the big goals, those are just sort of theoretical. But what's actually going to make a difference in your life is taking responsibility for each of the small decisions. And your life is not what you set out to do. It's not what you told people you're going to do. Your life is the strung together little sequence of the small decisions that you made. What am I going to do in the next 10 minutes? What am I going to do this afternoon? What book am I going to read? What food am I actually going to eat? What time am I going to go to bed? How am I going to interact with other people? And so you need to be kind to yourself, and you need to forgive yourself. But to me, that combination of having clear exciting personal goals in life, and then deliberately on a constant iterative basis, think about the responsibility of your small decision making, and so that it is consciously moving you in the direction that you want to go. And that leads to deliberately successful performance like nothing else that I know.
It's funny, actually, just having this conversation is making me feel so much more accountable to my own self, in that I have also just recently purchased a new pair of flashy trainers and joined a health club, and neither of which has actually led to me becoming super fit yet. So I know what I need to do next. Thank you so much, Chris, for speaking to us. I really appreciate it.
Georgie, it's been a pleasure to get to know you and chat with you as well. Thank you for making the time.
You too. Take care.